With the Republicans rushing to gather up the votes for the latest version of Trump Care, most of the media coverage has been focused on the battle within the Republican Party between moderates and conservatives. But the real story isn't what divides the moderates and the conservatives. It's what unites them. And what unites them is giving a giant tax cut to the very, very, very rich. Let's rumble. With me for tonight's Lone Liberal Rumble are Horace Cooper, attorney and senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research, and Charles Sauer, economist and president of the Market Institute. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Great to have you. So if Republicans get their way and repeal Obamacare, life will be materially worse for most Americans. The very, very rich, on the other hand, will make out just fine. Repealing the taxes that fund Obamacare, which has been a part of every version of the Republican health care plan, would make the rich even richer than they are. It's more or less reverse socialism, and millionaires would see 79% of the resulting windfall. This, in my opinion, is really why Republicans want to repeal Obamacare. But what's wrong with Obamacare's tiny 3% tax on rich people's already low-taxed investment income? Capital gains are maxed out at 20% taxes, so these rich people are this is only added to that. So the most that they're going to be paying is 23% to help pay for the rest of America to get health care. What's wrong with that?
Wow, when you explain it that way, this does sound a lot more attractive.
Yeah, these are people who are making money
reverse socialism,
with money,
saying to the people
very little
who actually pay the freight that you should get a break, as opposed to the people who free ride on those who pay the freight.
Well, this is my critique, is the free riders, the people who are paying a maximum 20% income tax rate.
No, that's not a free ride. That's not a free ride. If you go into the grocery store...
It is compared to what you and I and Charles are all paying at 39%.
If you go into the grocery store and you load up your cart and it costs you $1,000 and the person behind you gets in and it only costs them $300, that is a difference. That's a huge difference. And what happens in America today, higher income people pay the lion's share of the taxes that are occurring. No different.
They also have the lion's share of the income. This has nothing to do with any of what you just were talking about. Back to my question, it seems to me like the only thing that the Republicans want, the major motivating force, and probably what the coach. No, it's that 3% god-awful tax on the the 80% of the stocks that are held by the top 3% of the population.
No, Republicans want innovation and Republicans want investment. All right, that's what makes sense here. What it sounds like you're making the case for, though, is the end of the employer exemption, which does benefit rich people. The richer you are, the more exemption you get from the current tax code when it deals with health care. That's a great argument. I wish we could take that up to Capitol Hill today and actually have a tax plan, a health care system that works.
No, if you want to put it in the context of productivity, functioning economy, functioning nation, you have a better functioning economy, and you can check this out with any of the OECD nations. You have a better functioning economy when you have a healthy populace, when you have national health care, when everybody is covered. When everybody is not covered, you have a problem. Somebody gets contagious tuberculosis.
Causation is not causation.
I'm asserting causation.
China's growth and development is uncorrelated to coverage of medical treatment.
China has essentially a single health system. I worked in a hospital in Beijing.
I didn't say they don't. What we also know is that they have set up the protocols so that they rolled out the premise of this treatment, and it wasn't true for everyone. Meanwhile, the growth was true for the country. So that's just not true that causation is the same as correlation. And it also is the case.
Causation and correlation
it's also the case.
But I'm asserting
that from the 1950s,
both
from the 1950s. All the way up through the 1980s, America led the world with economic growth
and GDP growth. From the 1950s to the 1980s, the average working person worked the same job for at least 20 years. Now it's 7 years.
Whether they did or didn't,
it's a whole different world.
We didn't have
one-third of all workers in 1980 when Reagan came in were unionized. One-third of all workers in the United States had pensions. One-third of all workers had full.
The way that you're using those numbers is wrong. They didn't work that. When you go back in the historical data, they weren't working at the same job for 20 years. People were being let go right before their benefit plans kicked in. But if you look back, they were actually, no, that's the way we want to look
people,
back.
No, look at people who retired in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. They retired with full pensions. They you know, I mean, yes,
some people,
Reagan did a lot of damage to that.
I'll
get
give
that
you
in the
that
80s.
some people retired with those full pensions, but they also left other people in the dust. What we have right now is a 401k system that is actually helping people out. They're able to take their
system's a ripoff.
No, they're able to take their plans with them from job to job.
China pretended in the beginning to have a health care plan for all. They didn't. They had it for a few. Now they have it for more. But their growth existed prior to that. America never had a health care for all, and we had growth that occurred before that. Correlation is not causation.
I spent the month of November 1986, which was long before China's massive industrialization, in the Beijing International Acupuncture Hospital. I spent a month in there studying acupuncture and working on the wards every day. And it was all free. And the people who came in were, in some cases, very, very poor peasants from the countryside, and in other cases, you know, some of the political elite. But why are we arguing China?
I'm just telling you, it's not true that there's this correlation.
You keep changing subjects and throwing straw men out. It just boggles my mind.
In fact, this healthcare is just a drag on the economy.
No, but the original point was the Republicans the only reason the Republicans want to destroy Obamacare is because there's this 3% tax on the very, very rich.
That's not true. They want to destroy Obamacare because Obamacare is destroying the healthcare system. We have the last insurer of the individual market is leaving Iowa this week. There is more than like
Let's go to single payer. Let's go to single payer. We don't need banksters. We don't need these friggin' banksters in between me and my doctor. I don't want a banker between me and my doctor.
You want to give people a piece of paper that says I have health care. I want to give people access to health care, and the only way you can do that is through competition.
That's right.
During today's hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee, FBI Director James Comey justified any potential prosecution of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange by asserting that WikiLeaks is somehow fundamentally different from traditional media outlets.
It's an important question because all of us care deeply about the First Amendment and the ability of a free press to get information about our work and publish it. To my mind, it crosses a line when it moves from being about trying to educate a public and instead just becomes about intelligence porn. American journalists do not do that. They will almost always call us before they publish classified information.
Well, that seems like a very, very slippery slope. I mean, why don't we just shouldn't we be protecting acts of journalism rather than trying to define what is journalism and say, okay, Horace, you're not a journalist. Charles, you are, because you don't call the FBI and fact check, and Charles, you do, or something like. I mean, it seems to me like acts of journalism, whether they're done by a self-proclaimed journalist or a graduate of the Columbia School of Journalism, are still acts of journalism that should be protected.
I was troubled by what I saw. I don't think that distinction that he drew was a helpful one. On the other hand, I am not convinced that Julian Assange was interested in just being a whistleblower. I would be more interested in investigating to find out whether or not, when he was accessing the information that he got, he knew that, in fact, he was getting it from counterintelligence sources. If not, I don't know that there's a crime here that can be prosecuted.
Does it matter if it's actual information?
I personally don't care where he got it from. The person that got it might have been committing a crime, and if that crime was being committed, could possibly be held to be prosecuted for that crime. But
I'm saying
the information is true.
If Mr. Assange understood that he was soliciting that kind of material, that would be different.
The Washington Post does that right now.
Relevance of the investigation, not its broadcast, not whether it came out as a tweet or not. I don't care about any of that. If he had a newspaper, I don't care about any of that. But if he actually sat down with the Kremlin or with the Chinese government or with the North Korean government or any other government and said, please use me as a pass-through to take national security information, that's a problem. Now, that's not the distinction that Comey just drew.
Now, on the homepage of both the New York Times and the Washington Post, you will find a little box that says, would you like to give us information confidentially and anonymously? Yes. Which is the exact same thing WikiLeaks is doing.
I don't know that to be true, but as I said,
WikiLeaks
what the
information has
FBI
been corroborated.
What the FBI director said is a distinction that just says simply, I didn't like what you printed, and now you're going to be prosecuted. That should not be the standard. I would agree with you that that is the case, but even if the publisher of the Washington Post sits down with the Cuban government and says, please funnel me national security information, that's different.
I mean, look, this is why I don't like big government, right? Because big government doesn't like free press. They don't like free speech. They like controlling things because that is what helps give them power. I know that the left likes big government and they like that possibility, but Comey just let it slip out into the public of what big government is about. And so, no, what he said was awful. What WikiLeaks did, I think was good, but, no, I support limited government just for cases like this.
I don't see what this has to do with the size of government. This has to do with what is journalism and what is protected by the First Amendment.
When you're asking permission for somebody to report a study, that's a government that's too big.
That's James Comey who doesn't understand the First Amendment. That's what you've got. Anyhow, we're out of time. Charles, Horace, great having you both.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.